I'm Lauren Mitchell, 31 years old, and that night at my uncle's birthday party was the moment my world finally tilted for good. The smell of roasted beef and lemon cleaner filled the dining room, and the sound of silverware clinking against plates almost covered my father's voice, almost. "You've ruined our lives, Lauren. You're a burden," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. My mother's bitter smile sealed the words like a stamp of truth, and every conversation in the room died at once. I felt my hand freeze mid-air, fork suspended, as something deep inside me went quiet, not with shame, but with final clarity. Before I go any further, let me know where you're listening from in the comments. And don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to walk away to save your peace. For most of my life, I believed peace came from keeping things steady, from smoothing over what others broke. I was raised to think that being helpful made me worthy. My father, Richard, built our family on pride, his own mostly, and my mother spent her days managing his moods. I learned early to stay polite, to speak softly, and to carry more weight than anyone noticed. When my parents downsized after Dad's business slowed, I rented a room in their house to help out. It was supposed to be temporary. I paid rent every month, covered the internet bill, even chipped in for the mortgage when work was good. But over time, that arrangement turned into an unspoken rule I gave and they took. My brother Evan, 4 years younger and somehow always forgiven, still lived there too. No rent, no chores, not even a passing mention of responsibility. He was the favorite, and Dad never hit it. Evan makes good decisions, he'd say with pride, even when my brother's good decisions included quitting jobs or buying another dog he couldn't afford. I was the opposite, the one who asked too many questions, the one who made them uncomfortable by being independent. Still, I stayed thinking maybe that was what family meant. We had a rhythm uneven but familiar. I'd come home from my design studio, exhausted, set dinner on the table, and listen as Dad criticized my choices, my job, my apartment plans, my single life. My mother would pour another glass of wine and pretend to agree just to keep him calm. I told myself it didn't matter that I could survive the small cuts. What I didn't realize was how easily a lifetime of small cuts could bleed a person dry. That evening had started like any other family gathering: too much food, too many voices trying to talk over one another, laughter that felt borrowed. Uncle George's birthday brought everyone together for the first time in months, and for a while it almost felt normal. Relatives leaned in with warm smiles, filling my plate before I could ask. I laughed at one of Evan's jokes, and for a fleeting second I forgot how heavy everything felt. But my father caught that moment, the lightness in my face, and something in his expression hardened, like he'd been waiting to remind me of my place. When his voice broke through the noise, the room froze. The air went still enough to hear the clock ticking on the wall. Uncle George's smile faltered mid-laugh, and Aunt Karen busied herself with her napkin. Evan pretended to scroll on his phone like watching his sister get humiliated was just background noise. I looked at the faces around me, people who had known me all my life, and realized not one of them would say a word. I set my fork down slow and careful, meeting my father's glare with a calmness I didn't know I possessed. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just smiled. It wasn't defiance, it was release. For 31 years, I'd tried to earn the love that should have been mine without conditions. In that moment, I understood it never would be. I was done apologizing for existing. The rest of the dinner blurred into a quiet hum around me. Someone poured wine. Someone laughed too loudly to fill the silence. My mother's voice carried softly down the table, pretending nothing had happened. But I knew things had shifted. When I stood to leave, the scrape of my chair drew every eye in the room. My father looked up as if ready to strike again, but I didn't give him the chance. The hallway smelled faintly of furniture polish and dinner rolls cooling on the counter. My room, tucked in the back of the house, waited in familiar disarray, half-folded laundry papers on the desk, the suitcase under my bed still dusty from the last time I'd almost left. This time, I didn't hesitate. Clothes first, then my laptop charger, and the little fireproof box that held my documents. My hands didn't shake. Maybe that was what freedom felt like in its earliest, rawest form: quiet, steady, absolute. Through the window, I could hear the murmur of conversation returning to normal. They probably thought I was sulking upstairs waiting for someone to apologize, but no one would. Not in this family. I zipped my suitcase and slung my purse over my shoulder. As I opened the door, my mother stood at the end of the hallway, wine glass in hand, eyes sharp as glass. "Where are you going?" she asked. I didn't answer. I walked past her down the stairs through the dining room and out into the night. The air was cold enough to sting, and under the flickering streetlight my car looked smaller than I remembered, just another worn-out thing ready for the road. I tossed my suitcase in the back seat, slid behind the wheel, and exhaled. I didn't know where I was headed, only that I wasn't going back. Inside the house, the laughter started again, faint through the walls. Maybe they thought I'd return once I cooled off. But as I turned the key and the headlights cut through the dark, I knew something had ended for good. And what came next, what they would do when they realized I meant it would change everything. The cold air bit at my face as I pulled out of the driveway, the house shrinking in my rearview mirror until it disappeared behind the trees. My suitcase rattled against the seat, and the silence inside the car felt heavier than I expected. For the first time in years, there was no noise, no footsteps above me, no voice calling my name to fix something. Just quiet. I didn't have a plan beyond not being there, but that was enough for now. My phone buzzed before I reached the main road. Mom's name flashed across the screen, then Dad's, then the home landline. I ignored them all, but the calls kept coming, each one faster than the last. When I finally stopped at a red light, there were already a dozen missed calls and a handful of new messages. Some were long, others just fragments. "You'll regret this. Come home right now, we need to talk." I turned the phone face down and let it buzz itself to exhaustion. I drove aimlessly for a while through quiet neighborhoods and empty streets until a half-lit sign for a small apartment complex caught my eye. I'd seen it listed online earlier that week when I'd let myself daydream about leaving. The landlord lived upstairs and answered the door in a faded sweatshirt. We signed the lease in 10 minutes. It wasn't much a one-room studio with peeling wallpaper and a window that barely latched, but it was mine. When I set my bag down on the bare floor, the emptiness felt more peaceful than any comfort I'd known in that house. I sat cross-legged on the mattress, still in my coat, and finally looked at my phone again. 43 missed calls, my parents' even numbers I didn't recognize. The text notifications climbed so high I had to scroll to reach the top. At first they sounded worried. "We just want to talk." Then the tone shifted. "You owe us after everything we've done. Ungrateful. You'll be sorry when the bills are due." By the time I reached the latest one, my mother's words glared back at me. "Don't come back." I stared at the message for a long moment. My reply came easy. "Okay, I just stopped paying your bills." I hit send. The quiet that followed didn't last long. The phone lit up again, vibrating across the counter until it hit the edge. I turned it off and sat in the dark, listening to the low hum of the refrigerator. My chest ached, not from fear, but from something new: space. For years I'd been too close to breathe. Now the air was sharp and strange, but it was mine. By morning the calls started again. Evan's name popped up this time, and I hesitated before answering. "They're freaking out," he said immediately, whispering like he didn't want anyone to hear. "Dad's pacing, Mom's crying. They think you'll come crawling back." "They can keep dreaming," I said. "That's not all." His voice dropped lower. "Mom asked me for your Social Security number. She said it's for paperwork, but she's been going through the old files in Dad's office." I sat up in bed, my pulse quickening. What I told her I didn't know it, but she's still digging. She's been calling people too. Uncle George, Aunt Karen, trying to figure out where you are. "Let her try," I said, though my voice came out tighter than I wanted. "And Evan, don't tell her anything. If she asks, you know nothing." "Got it," he said, but I could hear the unease in his tone. "Jess, they're desperate." I hung up and stared at the blank ceiling. My parents knew enough about my accounts to cause real trouble. Years ago, when I was fresh out of college, I'd trusted them with my documents, bank papers, tax records, everything. Back then, I thought family meant safety. Now I knew better. I set up my laptop on the small counter that passed for a kitchen table and logged into my accounts. Everything looked fine. No strange withdrawals, no new charges. Still, the unease wouldn't fade. I started changing passwords one by one, tightening every lock I could. It was almost noon when I finally stopped typing. The phone buzzed again, another call from home. I didn't answer. Late that afternoon, I let curiosity get the better of me. I picked up when Mom called again, just to hear her voice. "Where are you?" she demanded before I could speak. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I'm fine, Mom," I said quietly. "You think you can just walk away?" "We can't pay our bills. Your father is shaking with stress. You did this to us." Her voice cracked, but not with heartbreak, with anger. "You told me not to come back," I said. "I'm just doing what you asked." Her tone flipped sweet all at once. "Honey, let's just talk. We can work this out. Where are you? We'll come get you." I almost laughed. "No." The sweetness vanished. "You think you're smart? We'll find you." The line went dead. A few seconds later, my phone buzzed again, a text from Evan. "They just left the house," it read. "Mom had your old mail in her hand. I think they hired someone." I stood by the window, the blinds closed tight. My heart pounded in my throat. Outside, nothing looked unusual. The parking lot was still the street empty, but the walls felt thinner now, the air heavier. I typed back, "Don't get involved." My phone buzzed again, unknown number. I didn't answer. Then a text followed. "You need to come home so we can sort this out. We'll find you either way." The words sent a chill down my spine. I grabbed my purse and keys and drove straight to the bank. The teller at the counter, a young man with kind eyes, listened patiently as I explained. "Someone might be trying to access my accounts," I said. "I need to update everything." He typed for a moment, then frowned. "Someone called yesterday asking about your balance. We didn't give them information because the answers didn't match our records." My stomach turned. It was them. "Lock it all down," I said. We changed passwords, security questions, even mailing addresses. I added alerts to every account, then stepped back outside. The air felt sharper, but the ground steadier beneath me. I was no longer reacting, I was protecting. The phone buzzed again as I reached my car. A new text appeared. "We're close." I lifted my head, scanning the lot. Nothing. Then another text followed this one with a photo. My car. The picture was grainy but clear enough to send adrenaline rushing through me. I shoved the phone in my pocket, started the engine, and drove. When I checked the mirror, a black SUV turned out from the side street and fell in behind me. I took random turns, looping through neighborhoods, but the SUV stayed steady, never too near, never too far. My palms were slick on the steering wheel. I spotted a gas station ahead and pulled in hard. The SUV rolled past, then stopped at the far edge of the lot. Inside the convenience store, I grabbed a bottle of water and paid in cash, keeping my eyes on the reflection in the window. My father sat in the passenger seat, his face rigid. Behind the wheel was a man I didn't recognize, mid-40s, stocky, his hands gripping the wheel like it was part of him. I texted Evan from the corner of the store. "Dad's following me. There's a man with him." He replied almost instantly. "That's Mark Harris, Uncle George's friend. Not legal stuff. Be careful." The words made my pulse race faster. I walked out of the store, calm on the outside, but every nerve alert. As I passed the SUV, the man's eyes followed me. Dad didn't move. Once in my car, I drove straight toward the main road, taking turns I hadn't planned until the police station came into view. I pulled into the lot and parked right in front. The SUV slowed, then rolled on by. I sat there with my hands still on the wheel, breathing in deep, steady pulls. They were gone for now. The relief came slow, a quiet tremor instead of a rush. I stayed parked under the station lights until the sun began to dip, orange streaks stretching across the windshield. My phone vibrated again, another message from Evan. "They're losing it. Dad's furious. Mom's crying to Grandma. They're saying they'll make sure you have no choice but to come back." I closed my eyes for a long moment. I didn't know what they meant yet, but I had the feeling the next step wouldn't just be about hurt feelings, it would be about survival. And whatever they tried next, I was ready to meet it head on. The sky outside the police station had darkened to a bruised blue by the time I pulled away. Streetlights flickered on, stretching long shadows across the road. I kept my speed steady, eyes flicking to the mirrors every few seconds, half expecting to see that black SUV again. The lot behind me was empty, but my mind refused to believe it was over. Every nerve in my body stayed tight, ready for the next move. When I finally reached the quiet side of town, I parked a block away from my apartment and sat there for a minute, watching the windows of my building through the windshield. Everything looked still. The upstairs light was off. No cars idled nearby. I grabbed my bag, locked the doors twice, and walked fast. Once inside, I checked the locks again, top-bottom chain. The silence pressed against my ears. The next morning, I woke to sunlight slicing through the blinds and a single text from Evan. "They're still talking about you," it read. "Dad says you'll have to pay no matter what." I didn't answer right away. I brewed coffee, trying to steady my hands around the mug. Then I typed back, "What does that mean?" He replied. A few minutes later, "They're calling a lawyer. Mom says you broke the lease." I sank onto the edge of the bed. I didn't even live there anymore, but on paper my name was still tied to the house. My father had made me co-signer when he refinanced 2 years ago, saying it was just for paperwork. That same signature could now be used to trap me. By noon, I was sitting in a small downtown law office across from a woman named Samantha Cole, late 40s calm, with the kind of voice that steadies a storm. Her desk was tidy except for a legal pad and a steaming cup of tea. I told her everything, paying rent to my parents, covering their bills being tracked, and followed the loan attempts in my name. She listened without interrupting, her pen barely moving. When I finished, she leaned back. "You've been supporting them financially for years," she asked. "Yes," I said, quietly. "They said I owed it to them, and now they're trying to file against you." I nodded. She let out a slow breath. "If they attempt an eviction after you've already vacated, it won't stand. You're not a tenant, they're family. And if they've used your name for credit applications, that's fraud. Keep everything, texts, voicemails, bank notices. Don't delete a thing." Her certainty steadied me more than I expected. When she slid a business card across the desk, I tucked it into my wallet like armor. "You're in a stronger position than they think," she said. "But don't engage with them directly. Let documentation do the talking." Outside, the air had a soft bite to it. The late afternoon sun glowed faintly against brick buildings, and for the first time in days, I felt my lungs expand without strain. I sat in the car, watching people walk by, ordinary faces, moving through ordinary lives, and felt the distance growing between who I'd been and who I was becoming. The feeling didn't last long. As I unlocked my car door, my phone buzzed with another message from Evan. "They know where you live," it said. My fingers tightened around the phone. How I typed back. His reply came fast. "Mom had your old mail. Dad said he's going to make you pay. They just left in the SUV. I didn't drive straight home. I circled the neighborhood once, stopping half a block away from my apartment. 20 minutes later, the SUV appeared slow and deliberate. My parents got out first, followed by Mark Harris. From where I sat, I could see Dad's shoulders squared. His hand balled into a fist. He pounded on my door hard enough to make the frame rattle. "I know you're in there, Lauren," he shouted. His voice carried down the street. "You can't walk away from this family." Mom's sobs trailed behind him. "Please, honey, we need you. We can't live like this." Mark just stood beside them, silent, arms crossed, scanning the sidewalk. I lifted my phone and hit record. Dad's voice rose again, sharp and ugly. The camera caught him kicking the door. That was enough. I called the police. The patrol car arrived 10 minutes later, red and blue lights washing over the building. When Dad saw them, his shouting stopped. Mom wiped her eyes fast, trying to look helpless. "She stole from us," Dad told the officers before they could speak. "She took our money and ran off." I stepped forward from across the street, phone still recording. "Officers, I said I don't live there anymore. They've been following me, trying to access my accounts. And just now, he tried to break into my apartment." I played the video. The sound of his kicks filled the air. One of the officers turned to my parents. "Sir, ma'am, you need to leave now. If this happens again, you'll both be arrested for harassment." Dad's face turned dark red. "She's our daughter," he said through clenched teeth. "She owes us. That doesn't entitle you to her money," the officer replied evenly. Mark broke first. Without a word, he turned and walked to the SUV. Mom hesitated, glancing between me and the officers, eyes glistening with something that wasn't remorse, just calculation. She followed Mark, tugging on Dad's arm until he finally moved. He paused once at the door, his glare hard and final, before sliding into the passenger seat. The SUV rolled away, taillights glowing until they vanished around the corner. The officers took a brief statement and handed me a case number before leaving. The street grew quiet again, the kind of quiet that feels earned. When I stepped back into my apartment, I leaned against the door and let out a slow, shaking breath. My phone vibrated again. Evan. "They're still mad," his text read, "but I think you finally got through to them." I didn't answer right away. The truth was, I didn't know if this was over or just another pause. I walked to the small window above the sink. The parking lot below was empty now, washed in the soft glow of a single streetlight. Somewhere out there, my parents were spinning their story to whoever would listen. But for the first time, it didn't matter. The locks were secure, the phone was full of proof, and the life I'd once carried for them no longer belonged to me. Still, I knew my father too well to believe he would stop quietly. There would be one more move, maybe two. He'd find another way to push, another way to claim what he thought he owned. I turned off the lights, sat on the edge of the bed, and waited for the hum in my chest to fade. It would take time to feel safe again. But tonight, the silence no longer felt empty. It felt earned. And somewhere deep inside, I could sense that this was not the end of their reach, only the beginning of what it would take to keep my freedom. The days after the confrontation felt heavier than the ones before it. Even though the police had warned my parents to stay away, I still checked the blinds every morning, half expecting that black SUV to be parked across the street. The world outside my window went on like nothing had happened. Delivery trucks, joggers, the hum of ordinary life. But inside, every sound made me flinch. Freedom, I learned, came with its own kind of silence. I threw myself into work to fill the hours. My design clients were patient, but my focus scattered easily. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped, waiting for another message from home. Evan called often, his voice caught somewhere between concern and exhaustion. "They're still talking to people," he told me one morning. "Dad keeps saying you'll regret this, and Mom's been asking around about your employer." I pressed my fingers against my temples. "They don't even know where I work now. They're guessing," he said. "But they're serious. They keep saying they'll make you pay." That word again, pay. It always came back to that. Money had been the thread connecting every conversation since I was old enough to earn any. To them, it wasn't about love or respect. It was about control. I called Samantha's office that afternoon. She didn't sound surprised when I explained what Evan had told me. "If they're digging for your employment records," she said, "they're probably trying to prove financial dependency. That's how they justify claiming you owe them. Keep your pay stubs, but don't give them anything directly." Her calmness steadied me. I spent the next few days organizing everything: bank statements, receipts, digital backups. My desk looked like a small archive of the past 6 years of my life, proof that I'd carried more than my share. But while I tried to stay focused, the sense of being watched crept back. One night, as I carried groceries inside, I caught a flicker of light in the distance, a car idling at the end of the block. I stood frozen for a few seconds before it rolled away. Maybe it was nothing, maybe not. I didn't mention it to Evan. He already sounded frayed each time he called. That weekend I went for a walk downtown, hoping to clear my head. The air smelled faintly of rain, and the sky threatened to open any minute. As I passed a bakery, a voice called my name. I turned to see Uncle George stepping out of a coffee shop holding a paper cup in each hand. "Lauren," he said, looking surprised but not unkind. "I wasn't sure it was you. I hadn't seen him since the party." "Hey, Uncle George." He nodded toward a bench nearby. "Got a few minutes? I could use help finishing one of these." I sat down, and he handed me a cup. The warmth of it steadied my hands. For a while, we just watched the cars pass. Then he sighed. "Your dad's been making the rounds," he said. "He's called every relative he can think of. Says you ran off with his money." I exhaled slowly. I figured as much. "I told him to stop," he said quietly. "Told him this isn't how family handles things. But he won't listen. He's too proud to admit he's wrong." I nodded, staring down at the coffee lid. "He's not used to losing control." George leaned back, studying me. "You look tired, kiddo. But I can tell you're standing your ground. That takes guts. Some days it feels more like survival than courage." He smiled faintly. Sometimes that's the same thing. When we stood to leave, he reached into his coat pocket and handed me a folded slip of paper. "That's the name of a friend of mine," he said. "She works in financial security. If they try anything with your accounts again, call her. No charge." "Thank you," I said softly, "for believing me." He gave a small nod. "I don't take sides. I just pay attention. And from what I've seen, you've paid more than enough." That evening I sat at my desk, tracing the edges of that slip of paper with my thumb. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel alone in this. Maybe I couldn't rebuild trust overnight, but having one ally made the road ahead seem less impossible. The next morning, Evan called again. His tone was urgent. "Mom's at it again. She's been in Dad's office all morning with a folder. She's talking to someone about verification forms." My stomach tightened. Verification for what, I don't know, but she said something about accounts. And Dad mentioned your old car loan. That car loan was still half in my name, something they'd promised to refinance but never did. "I'll take care of it," I said. "You sure?" "Yeah, just stay out of it, okay?" After we hung up, I called Samantha. She didn't waste time. "If they're using shared debt as leverage, close it now. Go to the bank in person. Get your name off every joint account." I spent the rest of the afternoon doing exactly that. The banker remembered me from the week before and gave a sympathetic smile as I handed over my ID. "I'd like to remove myself from anything tied to the Mitchell household," I said. He typed for a while, then frowned. "There was an attempted loan application yesterday. Large amount. It flagged as suspicious and was denied." I felt a dull pulse behind my eyes. "Please freeze everything." We spent nearly an hour closing accounts and adding fraud alerts. When I finally stepped outside, the sky had turned gray heavy with unspent rain. My phone buzzed as I reached my car, a text from Mom. "You're destroying this family. If your father ends up in the hospital, it's on you." I didn't reply. I just deleted it and drove home. That night, thunder rolled across the city. The rain came in sheets against the window, steady and cold. I sat on the couch, laptop open, updating passwords and contact information. When the storm eased, I walked to the window. Across the parking lot, under the weak glow of a streetlight, a car sat idling. For a moment, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. Then I saw the faint outline of someone in the driver's seat. The shape was too still to be coincidence. My chest tightened. I stepped back from the glass and reached for my phone. Before I could dial, headlights blinked once, then the car drove off into the rain. I didn't sleep much after that. Every sound made me startle. The next morning, Evan texted Dad was out late last night. Mom said he needed air. I stared at the message for a long time. By then I knew the truth. They weren't just angry anymore. They were unraveling. And every desperate move they made was a reminder that walking away had threatened something far deeper than money. It had threatened their power. As I sat at my small kitchen table, the morning light breaking through the clouds, I realized this wasn't simply a family dispute. It was a reckoning. And before it ended, I'd have to protect more than my savings. I'd have to protect my name. The rain finally stopped the next morning, but the air stayed heavy, the kind that clings to your skin long after the storm ends. I drove to my studio early, needing to focus on work before my mind wandered again. My coworker Rachel looked up from her desk when I walked in. She had that sharp kind of empathy that doesn't require many words. "Rough week?" she asked gently. "Something like that," I said, forcing a small smile. She didn't push. By noon we were both deep in projects, the rhythmic click of our keyboards filling the room. It was the first time in days I felt something close to calm. But when my phone buzzed against the desk, the familiar jolt of tension returned. It was Evan. "Call me now." I stepped outside, the wind cool against my face. He answered on the first ring. "Dad's at the bank," he said, his voice low. "He's trying to withdraw money from one of your old accounts." "Mom's with him." I closed everything I said quickly. "I know, but he's angry. He told the teller you stole from them. When they wouldn't release the funds, he called someone. He said, 'We'll take care of it another way.'" A chill crept down my spine. "Did he say what that meant?" "No, but Mom's been calling Uncle George. She said something about a court order." I pressed my hand to my forehead. "Evan, stay out of this. Please. Don't give them anything." "I won't," he said quietly. Just be careful." When I hung up, I stood there for a long time watching clouds move over the parking lot. It wasn't fear anymore. It was fatigue, the kind that seeps into your bones after too many battles. I went back inside, but focus was impossible. By the end of the day, my head ached from holding it all in. That evening, I met with Samantha at her office again. She greeted me with the same calm efficiency as before, sliding a folder across the desk. "I've been monitoring the case notes," she said. "Your father filed a complaint at the county office this morning. He's claiming you owe them for back rent." I laughed, but it came out brittle. "I was paying them rent." "I know," she said. "And I have the proof. Your transfers are well documented. This is intimidation, not a legitimate claim." She flipped through the papers, her finger tapping a line near the top. "What concerns me more is this. Your name is still attached to one of their credit accounts. They could try to use it to apply for new loans." My chest tightened. "Can they?" "Not legally," she said. "But that doesn't mean they won't try. I've already flagged it with the credit bureau. You're protected now." For the first time in weeks, I exhaled without feeling like I was running out of air. "Thank you," I said. She nodded. "Lauren, people like your parents operate on fear and dependency. The moment you stop reacting, you take their power away. Keep your distance, document everything, and live your life." Her words stayed with me as I drove home. The city lights blurred against the windshield, and for once, I let myself imagine what peace might look like, a life that belonged entirely to me. But the quiet didn't last. When I pulled into my building's lot, there was a white envelope taped to my door. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No name, just a typed message. "You think the law will save you? We always find a way." I stood in the doorway for a long time, the paper trembling slightly in my hands. Whoever left it hadn't signed it, but the message was clear. I called Samantha first, then the police. 2 officers came by, took photos, and filed a report. They were polite, professional, but one of them, Officer Lane, his name tag read, met my eyes and said quietly, "If you suspect it's a family member, we can escalate this. Harassment laws apply even when it's personal." "I'll think about it," I said. When they left, the apartment felt smaller than ever. I sat at the kitchen table, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. My phone buzzed again this time, a message from Rachel. "I made too much dinner." "Want some company?" I hesitated, then typed back, "Yes." She arrived 20 minutes later with a casserole dish and 2 glasses of wine. "You look like you haven't slept in a week," she said softly. "It's been a little tense," I admitted. Rachel didn't ask for details. We ate in near silence, the kind that didn't need filling. When she finally spoke, her voice was even. "You know you can't control how they act, but you can control how much of yourself you give to it." I nodded slowly. "I'm learning." She smiled faintly. "You're stronger than you think." After she left, I washed the dishes one by one, the repetitive motion steadying my thoughts. I thought about everything Samantha had said earlier, about taking back my power, about not reacting. Maybe that was the answer. Not revenge, not confrontation, just quiet distance. The next morning I took another step. I opened a new bank account in a different institution, rerouted my direct deposits, and changed my mailing address again. I even updated my driver's license. Every small change felt like another lock clicking into place, another piece of safety built by my own hands. Later that afternoon, I met with Uncle George at a diner off the highway. He looked relieved to see me. "You've got quite a storm around you, kiddo," he said. "Your folks have been calling everyone saying you turned them into the police." I shook my head. "I didn't. They came on their own. I figured," he said. "I told them to let it go before they dig a hole they can't climb out of. But your dad doesn't listen to reason anymore." I looked down at my coffee, watching the cream swirl slowly. "He's not going to stop, is he?" George sighed. "I don't think so. But you're doing the right thing. You can't fix people who won't see what they're breaking." Before we left, he reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You've got more backbone than anyone in this family. Don't let them scare you back into their world." The words stayed with me as I drove home. When I parked, the street was quiet. No idling cars, no flicker of headlights. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel watched. I walked up the stairs slowly, breathing in the cool night air. Inside, I sat down and opened my laptop. I wrote a brief email to Samantha confirming all my new account changes and attaching photos of the letter from my door. When I hit send, I felt something inside me settle. For so long, my parents had dictated every part of my life, where I lived, how I spent money, even how I viewed myself. But sitting there in that little apartment, I realized I didn't owe them anything anymore. Not an explanation, not my silence, not my fear. The phone buzzed once more, a late-night text from Evan. They're angry again, but Dad's slowing down. Maybe it's finally sinking in. I turned the phone face down and let the screen fade to black. The quiet around me felt different this time, less like a pause, more like the start of something new. And deep down, I knew it wasn't just safety I'd found. It was the first glimpse of peace. The following week moved slowly. Each day caught somewhere between peace and tension. The messages from my parents had stopped, but silence didn't feel like safety. It felt like the pause before a storm. Every sound outside my door made me look twice. Even at work, I caught myself glancing toward the window, expecting that black SUV to appear again. Rachel noticed. "You're somewhere else today," she said one morning, leaning against my desk with a cup of coffee. "Just trying to stay one step ahead," I said. She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Sometimes staying ahead means resting too, you know." I smiled faintly, but we both knew rest wasn't coming easy. That Friday, Samantha called with an update. Her tone was steady as always. "Lauren, the county clerk, confirmed your father's complaint was denied. The paperwork he filed didn't meet any legal requirement. You're in the clear for now." "For now," I repeated. "Yes," she said. "But stay alert. I've seen people like him double down when they realize intimidation doesn't work." That night I turned off my phone and tried to relax. I made tea, dimmed the lights, and settled on the couch. The city outside was quiet, except for the hum of traffic blocks away. For the first time in weeks, I almost felt normal. But just as I started drifting off, a soft thud hit my door. I froze. Another sound followed, a faint scrape, then footsteps retreating. I crept toward the peephole, heart pounding, but the hallway was empty. On the floor lay another white envelope. This one wasn't typed. The handwriting was my mother's. The message inside was short. "You've gone too far. Dad's health is failing. You'll regret this when he's gone." I sat on the floor, the note trembling in my hand. The handwriting wavered in places, like she'd written it through tears or maybe anger. I didn't know anymore which emotions of hers were real. The next morning I drove straight to Samantha's office. She read the note, her expression hardening. "This isn't about guilt," she said. "It's psychological pressure. Keep it. I'll add it to your file." I hesitated. Should I reply? "Absolutely not," she said. "No contact. Every message is bait." That night, Evan called again, his voice low. "They're saying Dad's blood pressure's through the roof. Mom blames you for it." I exhaled slowly. "Evan, please don't do that to yourself. You're not the messenger. They can call their doctor." He hesitated. "They're scared, Lauren. I think they really believe you'll come back if something happens." "I'm not coming back," I said gently. "Not like this." He didn't answer, and for a few seconds all I could hear was his breathing through the static. "You're doing what's right," he said finally, "even if they don't see it yet." Days passed. I threw myself into work, met Rachel for lunch, did everything I could to build some rhythm again. But underneath it all was the same question: how far would my parents go? That answer came sooner than I expected. It was late Tuesday afternoon when I got the call. Samantha's name flashed on my phone and her voice came brisk but measured. "Lauren, I just got a notice from the county courthouse. Your parents filed a civil claim against you. They're alleging financial exploitation." The words hung in the air. "Exploitation. They're claiming you used your influence to take their money," she said. "They attached fabricated payment records to the complaint, falsified transfers that make it look like you withdrew funds from their accounts." My pulse quickened. "That's impossible." "I know," Samantha said. "But it's filed, and that means we respond officially. Don't panic. I've already contacted the court to freeze any action until we review the documents." I rubbed my temples, the old familiar ache settling in again. "They won't stop." "They will," she said calmly, "because we're going to handle this by the book. Everything you've kept, bank records, statements, text messages, it all helps us. You've done everything right." That night, I gathered every file I had. The receipts I'd printed weeks ago, the copies of my bank statements, even the screenshots of their messages. I laid them out across the kitchen table one by one, each piece of proof that I hadn't imagined any of this. Around 9, my phone buzzed again. "Evan, they're talking to everyone, Lauren. Grandma, Aunt Karen, even the neighbors. They're saying you drained their savings." I closed my eyes. "Let them talk." "I know," he said, his voice breaking a little. "I just hate hearing them twist it like that. You don't deserve this." "None of us do," I said softly. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet until the clock on the microwave hit midnight. Then I opened my laptop and started drafting an email to Samantha. By the time I was done, the message was long but clear. I wasn't going to let them keep rewriting the story. 2 days later, I met Samantha at the courthouse. She handed me a stack of papers, our official response. "This," she said, "is how we push back." Inside were statements, screenshots, and notarized records showing every transaction I'd ever made to my parents. She'd built a wall of evidence. "They'll have no ground to stand on after this," she said. We submitted everything that afternoon. When it was done, I walked outside into the sunlight, the courthouse steps warm under my hands. For the first time, I didn't feel small. I wasn't hiding, running, or explaining. I was standing up, fully visible, backed by truth. That evening, I stopped by Rachel's place. She opened the door before I could knock. "How'd it go?" "Better than I expected," I said. "It feels like something finally shifted." She smiled, handing me a cup of tea. "Sometimes justice doesn't come with fireworks. Sometimes it's just paperwork and peace of mind." I laughed softly. That might be enough. But as I drove home later, the feeling of calm carried a new kind of edge. Because deep down, I knew my parents wouldn't take public humiliation quietly. For people like them, losing control wasn't just a bruise, it was a wound they'd never stop picking. When I pulled into my parking spot, I sat there for a moment watching the faint flicker of a streetlight. The air felt still heavy, waiting. Somewhere out there, I could almost sense their next move forming in the dark. And this time, I wasn't planning to hide. The courthouse hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning. The air felt cold and thin when I stepped outside that day, the kind that bites at your lungs no matter how many layers you wear. I parked 2 blocks away, my hands trembling slightly on the steering wheel before I forced myself to let go. I wasn't afraid of losing anymore. I was afraid of what it would mean if they never stopped. Samantha met me at the entrance, her calm presence steadying my nerves. She carried a neat folder under her arm and greeted me with a brief nod. "You've already won half this fight," she said quietly. "You showed up." Inside the courthouse buzzed with low voices and echoing footsteps. When my parents walked in, I barely recognized them. My father's hair had thinned, and the sharp confidence he'd always carried looked worn down. My mother clung to his arm like she was holding him together. They didn't look my way. The judge, a middle-aged woman with silver hair, called the case promptly. My father spoke first. His voice was hoarse but loud enough to fill the room. He painted himself as a victim, claimed I'd drained his finances, abandoned the family, left them struggling. My mother nodded through tears, playing the role she'd practiced for years. Samantha's cross-examination was quiet but devastating. She presented bank records showing every transfer I'd ever made to them, proof that I had paid rent, utilities, and covered their debts. She submitted the text messages, the threats, and the handwritten notes. Each page landed like a stone in the silence that followed. By the time she finished, my father's voice had gone thin. He tried to speak again, but the judge raised a hand. "Mr. Mitchell," she said evenly, "there is no evidence of exploitation here. Quite the opposite. Your daughter has provided years of financial support that you failed to acknowledge." My mother began to cry softly, but the sound didn't draw sympathy. It just echoed in the space between us. When the judge dismissed the claim, the room went still. Samantha gathered her papers, gave me a small nod, and we walked out. In the hallway, I finally exhaled. "It's over," I whispered. "For now," she said gently. "But if they contact you again, we'll file for a restraining order. You've earned your peace. Don't let them take it again." Outside sunlight spilled across the courthouse steps. I stood there for a long moment, breathing in the cold air. My hands were steady now. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like someone's possession. Later that afternoon, I met Evan at a quiet diner off the highway. He looked tired, the way people do when they've been carrying two truths too long. He slid into the booth and didn't say anything for a while. "I saw them afterward," he said finally. "Dad's furious. Mom keeps saying you embarrass them." "They embarrass themselves," I said softly. He nodded, stirring his coffee without looking up. "I think they finally realized they can't reach you anymore." We sat in silence for a while. There was no need for apologies between us. We'd already said what mattered in smaller ways. Before we left, he handed me a folded piece of paper. "This is Dad's old account info," he said. "If he tries anything else, you'll know where to look." "Evan, I'm done covering for them," he said. "It's time somebody told the truth." That night, I sent Samantha the information. She thanked me and said she'd alert the fraud department just in case. Then, for the first time in months, I went to bed early and slept without waking up every hour to check my phone. The next morning, a knock startled me awake. Through the peephole, I saw a uniform Officer Lane. When I opened the door, his expression was professional but kind. "Good morning, Ms. Mitchell," he said. "I wanted to follow up personally. We received another complaint from your parents last night." My stomach dropped. "What kind of complaint? They accused you of harassment?" he said, handing me a copy of the report. "But we reviewed the evidence. It's unfounded. I just wanted you to hear it from me." I rubbed a hand over my face. "They're not stopping." He gave a slow nod. "They're losing control. Sometimes that's when people lash out the most. Keep documenting everything. You've handled this the right way so far." When he left, I stood by the window watching his patrol car pull away. The street outside looked quiet again, almost peaceful. But something inside me knew the quiet was fragile. That afternoon, I drove to Uncle George's house. He lived on the edge of town, where the land opened up to a stretch of fields and weathered barns. When he saw me step out of the car, he smiled sadly. "I heard about the hearing," he said. "You did what you had to do. I didn't want it to come to this," I said. He motioned for me to sit on the porch beside him. "Your dad was always proud, maybe too proud. Losing control hit him harder than he'll ever admit." We sat for a long while without speaking, the sound of the wind rustling through the trees, filling the silence. Then he said quietly, "Don't let this harden you, Lauren. Boundaries don't make you cold. They make you whole." When I drove home that evening, the sun dipped low over the horizon, painting the road in amber light. I thought about what he said. For so long, I'd confused peace with distance. But maybe peace was something different, something earned, not borrowed. When I reached my apartment, there was one last message waiting on my phone. It was from Evan. "They're selling the house. Dad said he can't stand to look at it anymore." I stared at the words, unsure of what to feel. Relief, sadness, maybe both. That house had been more than a home. It had been the center of everything I'd survived. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights flickering against the night sky. The reflection in the glass looked like someone I hadn't seen in years, steady, clear-eyed, unafraid. For the first time, I believed it might really be over. Still, a small part of me knew the story wasn't finished yet. Closure doesn't always come in courtrooms. Sometimes it shows up quietly long after the noise has faded. And soon I'd learn what that silence really meant. A few weeks passed before I drove past my parents' old house again. The for sale sign stood at an angle in the yard, its edges curled from rain. The shutters I'd painted years ago had faded to a dull gray, and the porch light hung crooked, still burned out. I sat at the curb for a moment, engine running, watching sunlight flicker through the branches. It didn't feel like revenge or triumph, just quiet distance. That place had held too much noise for too long. Evan called later that day. He said the house had sold quickly, and that our parents were moving in with one of Mom's cousins down south. They hadn't mentioned me, not once. I thanked him for letting me know, and for a long time neither of us spoke. Finally he said, "I hope this means they'll calm down." I told him I hoped the same. After we hung up, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea, letting the late afternoon air settle around me. For the first time in months, the quiet didn't feel heavy. It just felt like peace. I thought about everything that had happened, the humiliation at that dinner table, the fear, the courthouse, the endless messages, and realized that none of it could touch me anymore. The weight they'd carried into every room no longer followed me home. I went back to my routine slowly. Work became steadier. Life became simpler. Rachel and I started walking after work, our conversations drifting from deadlines to weekend plans to nothing at all. Samantha sent a short message one day, case closed. No further filings. I saved it in my inbox, not because I needed proof, but because it marked the end of a story I'd spent years trying to escape. When spring came, I visited Uncle George for coffee. His porch overlooked a stretch of open field, the grass turning green again. "You look lighter," he said with a smile. "I feel lighter," I answered. He nodded, rocking gently in his chair. It's strange how freedom can take longer to feel than it does to win. We sat in comfortable silence for a while. I asked about his garden, and he asked about my studio. Before I left, he handed me a small wooden box. "Found this in Dad's garage before they packed up," he said. Inside were a few old photos, me and Evan as kids smiling on that same porch. My chest ached, not with grief, but with something softer. I thanked him and tucked the box under my arm. That night I placed it on the shelf near my desk. I didn't hide it or throw it away. I just let it be there, a reminder of where I came from, not something that owned me anymore. I'd spent years paying bills that weren't mine and apologizing for existing. Now every small decision, every meal, every quiet evening, every boundary felt like a kind of wealth I'd built for myself. Evan still calls, sometimes always careful to keep the conversation light. We talk about work, about the new puppy he adopted, about how Mom sends him long messages but rarely asks questions anymore. I tell him to take care of himself, and he says the same back. Some wounds don't need closure to heal, they just need time and distance. On evenings when the air is cool and the city hums softly outside my window, I think about that night when my father called me a burden. If he could see me now, calm, steady, unafraid, maybe he'd understand that I was never the problem. Maybe not. Either way, I'm done carrying his words. It's strange how the smallest moments become turning points. A dinner, a single sentence, a slammed door, and suddenly your whole life rearranges itself. I didn't set out to teach anyone a lesson. I just decided to stop disappearing in a house that never wanted me visible. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that peace isn't given by people who broke you. You build it one boundary at a time until the noise fades and the quiet feels like home again. Before I end this story, I want to leave you with something simple. If you've ever had to walk away from people who couldn't see your worth, know this: it isn't cruelty to choose peace, it's courage. Thank you for listening to my story. If it reminded you of your own, share it with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to start over. And if you haven't already, stay with us for more stories like this about finding strength, setting boundaries, and finally coming home to yourself.